progress. Hi, I'm Denise Howell, and you're here on the Hearsay Culture Network. Today, I'm thrilled I'm interviewing my co host here at the network, Dave Levine. Dave is a law professor at Elon University and the longtime host of Hearsay Culture. So, Dave, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Denise. Good to see you.
We're trying out a format that neither one of us has used before, the famous Vogue 73 questions format of an interview. And I figured this would be just a great way for me to get to know Dave better and for you to get to know Dave better. So, without any further ado, we're going to launch right into this. Dave, what's been your favorite moment as a teacher?
I think my favorite moment as a teacher has been those times when students express a lack of confidence in their knowledge, and then through some good back and forth, they get a good answer, they have a good insight, and they have this moment of, wow, I can actually do this. It generally happens in the first year more than it does in upper level courses, but I find that super rewarding.
That's really cool. What are you working on now?
Other than our project with the Hearsay Culture Network, I'm doing a lot of work on trade secrecy and access to trade secrets in COVID vaccine creation. How do we get pharmaceutical manufacturers to share information that they might not otherwise share, that allows for quicker and scalable production of affordable vaccines? It's a big challenge at the international level, and I'm working on a project with Josh Sarnoff, who I think you might know. He's at DePaul. And he's a patent guy. He knows Eric a lot. He's in the community for a long time. So he and I are working on that.
Awesome. What's your go to DoorDash order?
Yeah, generally speaking, when I use DoorDash, I am a tried and true New Yorker, and it is Chinese takeout, right? And it's nothing to write home about, but you're not going to be sick. So your chicken with broccoli and garlic sauce, extra spicy, and some dumplings, and I'm done.
Mushu pork all the way, baby.
Yeah, that's good stuff too. Yeah.
What's something in tech policy that both political parties can agree on?
Well, right now, I mean, it sure seems that social media is the root of all evil. It's kind of remarkable how there's very little consensus on anything. But even a couple of days ago, right? Instagram CEO yesterday, I guess it was Instagram CEO was testifying, and it's weird to see Senator Blackburn from Tennessee and Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut more or less, preaching from the same book.
And what's something in tech policy that both political parties will never agree on?
That's a good one. I think it's it's hard for me to envision the two parties agreeing on whether the age-old question that you and I have been thinking about and talking to people about for years, which is the technology bad, or is it the user of the technology that's the problem? I think the parties have a very oftentimes different view on who bears responsibility. And it's hard for me to envision right now that the Democratic Party is going to say that its users who should be held more accountable. And just as it's hard for me to see the Republican Party saying, well, the tech companies bear all responsibility.
What's the least understood part of the First Amendment?
Uh, the the question of what or who has protection under the First Amendment, I think, confuses people a ton. Right, the First Amendment is not a defense to lots of causes of action. It's not a defense, for example, to copyright infringement, even though a lot of people think it is, because they say, well, it's free speech. So I think it's really the question of to whom it applies and when doesn't it.
I love that answer. And what's the least understood part of Section 230?
Boy, um, I know you're asking the questions. I might say, what is the part of Section 230 that is understood? I think that's even harder. I'd say the least understood part of Section 230 is the um, the role or the proper role of platforms. There's our mutual friend Eric Goldman, right, has written about this and advocated on it extensively. I think there's a lot of confusion regarding what Section 230 says or indicates platforms should be doing, because as you know, right, the history of Section 230 was actually to encourage filtering, right, to protect children. And in fact, now, right, as the way Section 230 is played out, there is pretty arbitrary filtering that's happening. So the role of platforms.
Finally, what's the least understood part of copyright law?
Um, I used to always say it was fair use. In other words, oh, if I can take 3 sentences of a work and it's a fair use. No, that there's no qualitative or quantitative, measure there. Oh, if I sell it, it's not a fair use. No, that's not true either. You can sell plenty of things that are fair use. But I think today it's a little different. I think today we have a harder question, which is, what what is the how does copyright law encourage people to create in the first instance? Because we're looking right now. I mean, look at what's happening with NFTs, right? I mean, is copyright playing any role at all in the creation of NFTs when the entire technology is built, or theoretically built on the blockchain? That's the monetization, that you have absolute control over it because it's the blockchain, regardless of copyright.
What do you think is the biggest cybersecurity threat?
Users themselves. I think we are our own worst enemy when it comes to cybersecurity. I mean, I just think of Potesta, right? Hillary Clinton campaign director who, you know, failed cybersecurity 101 and clicked on the unknown link, which apparently opened up, right, the DNC's files to WikiLeaks, and the rest is history, or to Russian hackers or whoever it was, I should say. We're our own worst enemy. I mean, the popular answer, of course, right now is the Chinese or the Russians, right? But it's us. Don't have a password called admin. Don't click on links that you don't understand. Don't leave your laptop in your car that has private information on it. I don't mind saying it was public. I think I have lifetime um, identity theft protection, because back when I was at Stanford full time, someone left a laptop in their car that had my social security number on it. So that kind of stuff.
What's your favorite place you've worked?
Well, I work at Elon right now, Denise, and I have to include Elon for my employer that might be listening. But I will say, I just said it, but I'll say it again. Stanford was an amazing place to work. I was there for 2 years as a fellow, aside from the fact that it was how I, began my transition into teaching, which I love. Stanford, for those that are interested in the kind of stuff we're interested in, not to mention just are inquisitive, is a playground. I'll tell you a funny, quick story on that. My wife and I, we came straight from New York, and we got out, to your, roughly speaking, neck of the woods. I know you're in LA, but California in midsummer 2005, and it's sunny and it never rains, and everyone's walking around smiling. And I was in New York. I'm thinking, why are these people smiling all the time? Well, it didn't. I mean, I know we have droughts the droughts in California. I'll make this more serious, but on a lighter note, it didn't rain for 5 months, and everything was just kind of hunky dory, and the weather's beautiful every day, and it's not humid. And I understood, but by Thanksgiving.
I miss Northern California a ton, but I've come to love Southern California too.
Yeah.
How many pets do you have?
Right now, we have one. We have our 18-month-old Australian Labradoodle Latka, who looks like a potato pancake.
That's incredible. What's on your vacation bucket list?
I was just discussing this with my sons. I'm a as if it isn't obvious, I'm a white Jewish male lawyer from New York, and which makes me one of the few that hasn't been to Israel. So I actually would like to go to Israel. The other place that I want to visit, and it's a strange one, or strange in light of my family's history, is Russia and the Ukraine. Everyone Both sides more or less fled those places, 100+ years ago because of persecution. I had the opportunity to go over to Moscow a few years ago during really the height of the tension with Russia, to speak through a WIPO, and Russian government event. I chose not to do it because I didn't feel comfortable going, and frankly, I didn't want to support the Putin government in any way, shape, or form. But I would love to try to go there at some point.
What's the most annoying part about being a professor?
Um, it well, it's a great job. I mean, I don't want to sound hokey because you know probably the most annoying part is grading, but I put that in. It's not that annoying, frankly. I think I found it more annoying earlier in my career. I mean, every job has its picadillos. I'm not going to say, administrative work because we all have to do that. I'd say grading lightly. Maybe today, actually, let me alter the answer. Can I retract that answer?
Of course.
Let me retract and say today in 2021, I think the most annoying thing about being a professor is the upheaval that has impacted education. So I'll say right now it is, ironically, because we're using it and it's so useful, but Zoom, it's being on screens. I'll give you a perfect example of this one. I went to the gym this morning, and there's a person, the guy who I train with, says, "Oh, do you know X student at Elon?" And gave me the name, and I did not recognize the name. The student's mother works there. The student's mother comes over and says, "Oh yeah, Professor Levine, my daughter had you for a class last year." And you know what? I didn't recognize the name because we were on Zoom and I had 80 students and I didn't know everyone. And it was pretty embarrassing, to be honest. I mean, I apologize profusely because it's not how I do things. So I'd call it Zoom.
Yeah. Well, getting off Zoom, what's your favorite spot on campus?
When we're over in Greensboro, so we're kind of separate from the main campus, but when I go over to the main campus, my favorite part of the campus is a kind of a rock garden that's has been designed for kind of like thinking and relaxation. It's connected to a spiritual center. It's on campus. The university is affiliated with the United Church of Christ, but it's a very general affiliation in the sense that it's really a pretty egalitarian university. So there's a spiritual center for all of the major Western and Eastern religions, and I like to sit there. I don't do it nearly as much as I would like, but when I go, I like to do
Very cool. What do you tell your friends' kids who are thinking of going to law school?
I two things. First, it is a wonderful career as long as you think very carefully about what you want to do with it. And so that's number one. Think carefully about what you want to do. Secondly, the second thing I say is, if you want the most, and this is very practical, if you want the most flexible and usable and diverse degree post bachelor, the JD is it. Right? Many jobs say JD or MBA, but with a JD, you don't have. This is the second point. You don't have to practice law. It's certainly what a majority of JD graduates do, but it's such a flexible degree that it's valuable thinking in those terms.
What's the most embarrassing thing you remember happening at work?
Um, well, I'll tell this one. I a few years ago, standard class, and I generally take a break if a class is longer than an hour, and so during the break, and this is a large lecture style class, about 70 students. Um, One of my students just kind of breezes by the lectern where the computer is and drops a little note on the lectern and just keeps going, doesn't even look at me, which is unusual. Sometimes students will drop off like I wasn't prepared, which is kind of what I assume. I picked it up and it said, "Professor Levine, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but your fly's down." So it was, and the student was right. And so we were during a break. I went over to a bathroom and I fixed my pants, but that was pretty embarrassing. Uh,
That's not so bad if that's the worst one.
oh,
Everyone
well,
has to XYZ every now and then.
yeah, well, it turned out the little tail of a shirt was sticking out.
Ah.
It was a little funnier, but yeah, that's about as bad as it got.
All right. You can change any law governing the internet. What do you do?
Wow. Um, right now, I think I would change the rules that govern. Um, that's a really hard question, actually. I think the rules that govern how um, transparent and clear content creators and operators are, which is very convoluted. So let me be more specific. Because there is still enormous misunderstanding about the powers of these technologies. I think the plain English movement that pervaded law and was fairly successful several decades ago needs to exist here. So what am I saying? Nudging the power players, and I'm not just talking about social media, but I'm talking about the U.S. government, right, as well. The power players on the internet to being absolutely clear and unambiguous about what they are doing on the internet is essential. And I know it's abstract because there's so many other issues, but to me, that's a nuts and bolts question that would allow for better policy making because we have a better understanding, that would allow consumers to be able to, in theory, judge better what we have. And it might, in a roundabout way, deal with a lot of the misinformation and disinformation issues that we have. Of course, baked into that is the assumption that people care about such things, which is an open question right
Got it. Who was your favorite U.S. president?
now. And so you didn't limit it to lifetime, so let me just think for a moment. In my lifetime, I'm going to say Bill Clinton, even though his personal life obviously was reprehensible to me. But in terms of his willingness to bridge build, his acumen as a politician, and just the results, with the notable exception of missing the terrorism threat. I think he was a great president. Of all time, I've always been um, an enormous admirer of FDR. Again, no president's perfect, but and by that I mean, to be clear, right? His blindness to the Holocaust, which is well documented. But in terms of leading this country, for the most part through World War II, I've always have admired him, and I've read quite a bit about him. I think it's cliche to some degree to mention Kennedy, but Kennedy, of course, his term was cut short. But a bit more of an obscure, um, person. No, I mean, no president's obscure. But McKinley, who was assassinated, his abilities to, or abilities that he demonstrated to deal with the robber barons, I think is something that hasn't been studied enough. And I'll just jump in and say, Wilson, his reputation has only diminished rapidly in the last 20 or 30 years, but he's a complex character as well.
If you're not teaching law, maybe you can teach U.S. history for
Yeah,
us one of these
yeah,
days.
yeah, that'll be fun.
What's your favorite U.S. law, speaking of which?
Well, you know, my favorite U.S. law is probably the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For fairly obvious reasons. I think if I'm going to, push a little further, um, specifically within the Constitution, people can cite the Bill of Rights, but I would point. I mean, it's probably cliche also as a law professor, but Article 3, creating the judiciary. I mean, certainly recent years of the three branches of government, the judiciary has probably withstood overall the challenges better than the other two. And I think that's the blessing and the curse of having courts that are simultaneously unaccountable, because judges aren't elected, but also therefore divorced from the political processes and seem to be eating the other two branches of government.
Yeah, checks and balances, baby. Cryptocurrencies, fad or future?
You know, I will admit that I've been a skeptic of cryptocurrencies. I'm gonna go with fad. Not because I don't think that there are other ways to monetize the internet, but I don't think that the vision of cryptocurrency creators to more or less supplant monetary systems tied to governments, it seems highly dubious to me, even with my general view of the internet as having enormous potential.
Your house is on fire, your family and your animals are safe, and you can carry one item out with you. What do you bring?
I mean, photographs. I mean, I do have photographs from, actual printed photographs that aren't digitized, that go back quite a while in my family's history, including an album that my great uncle put together working on Curtiss aircraft at Chanute Field in Illinois in the 30s, 1930s. Not to mention, I have on the wall a cop, which I'm going to put under the heading of photograph. A letter that my great grandfather received from the Hebrew Immigrant Association in Bucharest when he escaped on foot from the Ukraine in 1922. And the letterhead there, includes really all of these Eastern Europe Jewish communities that no longer exist. So I would grab that stuff.
Really, really cool. What's your favorite restaurant anywhere in the world?
My favorite restaurant anywhere in the world is I'm going to go with boy, this is hard too. These are good questions, Denise. I like this. Um, I'm going to go with Becco, which is on Restaurant Row in Manhattan. They have a legendary, at least by New York and theater standards, three-course or three pasta price fix pre-theater dinner that I have probably had 24 times at least in my life before theater, and I've taken everyone from my wife to my mother, my grandparents. I mean, my late grandparents there, not to mention many dates. So I'll go with Becca.
I know I noted that down, and for anyone else who wants to, could you spell that, please?
Becco.
There we go.
BCCO.
What's something you're saving up for?
Um, that's a good question too. Right now, I'll tell you what I'm saving up for. Although it's not terribly expensive, it's just kind of me. I collect jazz vinyl, or I've been collecting jazz vinyl in recent years. My Benjamin is my younger son is really a very gifted pianist. I mean, I say that as any parent talks about their children as being gifted, but he's really got a blessing there. So what's the thing? I want to buy a first pressing of Bill Evans' Waltz for Debbie, which is one of one of the most well known classic jazz albums in ever. It generally sells a playable copy of it, meaning it doesn't skip and you can actually listen to it on a record player. Generally sells for about $700 to $800. One that's in better shape, easily is $2,000. And I just I'm not used to buying records that are that expensive. So I'm saving in my mind for when I'm going to pull the trigger on it.
Very, very cool. Where do you volunteer your time?
I do a lot of volunteer work in the Jewish community here in Greensboro. I'm on the board of Reform Temple. I'm also involved with, have been involved with Jewish Family Services, which runs a food pantry, not just for the Jewish community, but for the entire community in the Triad area of North Carolina. I also, after our last president was elected, I founded a nonpartisan advocacy organization called the Guilford Voters Coalition that has about 30 active members. individuals and folks like that. So I do a lot of work there. And then just a lot of what in the Jewish community, or at least in the Reform movement, it's called Tikkun Olam, but it's what means generally healing the world, and it's volunteer work. So it's everything from work. There's Greensboro has a number of Afghani families that have been resettled, and so helping them out, donations and things like that. And I do, and I wherever I go that I spend any period of time, I try to do some kind of community help effort. So my in-laws live in McCall, Idaho, which is central Idaho, and they they have something every year. This is in the mountains in a very cold part of the country, called Woodstock, where the community gets together and chops. I don't even know how much wood, and then community members drive the wood to impoverished people in the area who use this wood not for bonfires but for heat and cooking. And so I've done that the last few years with my sons. So a lot of that kind of hands-on work combined with volunteer or other leadership efforts.
So neat. What's the best piece of technology you've ever used?
Um, Best piece of technology. I mean, I'm such a music nerd. I mean, it's easy to say that the iPod was a game changer, because it was. But I'm gonna say this, since you said technology and you didn't limit it,
Mhm.
the record player. I mean, a good record player has sound which cannot be replicated as well in any other medium or device. I did a lot of work at Stanford, working with music archivists through some projects that Larry Lessig had me work on. And when you start with the wax cylinder all the way up to today, I think music archivists would say, in terms of media that are available to the public, the vinyl slash wax record, well pressed, gives the most true sound. So I'm going to go with the record player.
I'm going to hazard a guess and say you and I both grew up listening to vinyl Beatles albums on our living room floors through headphones like these.
You're right, and also and getting a lot of pushback because listening to the Beatles in the '80s made me kind of my dad or something like that. So
Mhm.
I remember getting yelled at by made fun of for listening to Aerosmith in the '80s. Before they started doing so.
Okay, well, on that note, what's your guilty pleasure?
Boy, I hope Benjamin doesn't hear this. The answer is, most recently I watched Squid Game. And I watched it because my younger son kept telling me that everyone, quote unquote, in his sixth grade class was watching it, and I knew it was too violent for him. But I watched the first episode, thinking, let me just make sure that I'm right, and then I watched the whole series, and it wasn't the best thing I've ever seen, but I really enjoyed it. Along those same lines, although I feel guilty about Squid Game. I want to be clear about that. I don't feel guilty about Ozark, which is brilliant in my view, at least of the recent.
Artificial intelligence saves us or sinks us?
Um, Artificial intelligence, if used properly, I think could save us. I think if we could actually harness this technology to figure out, for example, carbon capture and things like that, and making calculations that we can't understand, I think it's great. My fear, however, is that because we tend to lack ethics in these spaces, or at least to think about it, that it could be our undoing.
Best music album of all time?
Led Zeppelin 4.
Ooh, that was easy. What's your favorite way to exercise?
Tennis.
Millennials, overcoddled or underrated?
uh, uh, Overcoddled or underrated? I'll go with underrated.
What's your favorite John Hughes film?
Um, you know, it's probably Breakfast Club. Yeah, I mean, for sure.
A classic.
Yeah.
Podcasting, jumped the shark or miles to go?
Boy, being immersed in this as I am, I might say jump the shark at this point. I mean, it's crowded and it's confused, and everyone's trying to figure out how to squeeze a dime out of it.
How do you stay balanced?
Well, thank you for assuming that I'm balanced, first of all. Secondly, I try to get adequate sleep. I mean, it's kind of simple. I ignored that for most of my life, frankly, in the, in the world of, if how hard are you working? Who's working the hardest? I think I'm coming up on a big birthday in January where I'm going to be 50, and I have come to appreciate the need to take care of myself better, and it starts with that kind of self-care. So sleeping has really, and I just mean 8 hours, by the way. I don't mean like anything more than that.
Yep. What's your favorite place in the U.S.?
Manhattan.
The internet, love it or leave it?
Love it. I mean, it's got lots of flaws, but I mean, here we are.
Yep. What's the thing your students worry about the most?
I think they worry about, understandably, how are they going to pay their bills, and that's something I take very seriously.
What's the thing your students should worry about the most?
I think they should be worrying, frankly, very carefully about whether they're going to have a place that they want to live, either in a democracy or on a planet that's habitable.
How can you mend a broken heart?
Love is a many splendored thing. Should I use another cliche towards you? I honestly, I think it's the golden rule is how you mend a broken heart, right? I don't think it's difficult to do in practice, but it's not profound. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And when one's heart is broken, right, when we've all experienced that, some far more profoundly than others, having empathy, right, being able to, particularly as a man, I'll say this, my tendency is to want to solve everything, but I've learned to just listen and not necessarily offer a solution.
Tech space bros, visionaries or vile?
Vile. I mean, I have to, yeah, vile.
Vile. Summer or winter?
Not gonna be good for the show, Denise. We're gonna have to edit some of this on the show. Sorry, summer or winter? As a kid, winter. As an adult, summer. So summer.
And along those lines, daylight savings time, anachronistic or indispensable?
Anachronistic, without question.
What's your favorite outdoor activity?
Walking the aforementioned Laka with my family.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
What's your favorite section of the bookshop?
I always find myself in, not surprisingly, in the history and political science section. Even I try to push myself towards fiction and literature, and I always wind up saying, who's offering insights on what's happening now, and what should I be reading?
Facebook, well-intentioned or innovative and malevolent and dangerous? Oh wait, you know what? I've got to redo that one. I hope we can edit because I said my question wrong. Facebook, well-intentioned and innovative or malevolent and dangerous?
I was going to say I like innovative and malevolent.
Well, maybe that's the right answer.
I think that's the right answer, but since I understand the format, I'm sad to say I have to go with the latter, even though, and I'll say it again, I haven't said it, but I'll say it here. I'm a huge proponent of 230. I just wish we had, we need companies that are worthy of that protection.
Introvert or extrovert?
Me?
You.
Yeah, extrovert for the most part.
Mac or PC?
PC, but that's more pathway dependency. I think I could probably get used to a Mac if I used it more.
Android or iOS?
iOS.
Sports car or SUV?
Coming on 50, the answer should be sports car, but the SUV is much more practical.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Again, it's funny. I want to say Star Trek because I love the ethic, but it's Star Wars by a wide margin.
Have you ever posted to TikTok?
I haven't. I have not.
When are you most productive?
I tend to be most productive still, even though I'm too old for it, late at night. I tend to kind of hit a stride between 9 and 1 a.m. Unfortunately, as I said a short while ago, I need more sleep now. So I'm kind of pulling that back so that I'm better in the early afternoon.
That's the trade off, though. All the distractions melt away in those later hours.
Exactly.
Who are you proud of?
Um, I I am well. There's a lot of people I'm proud of right now, which I guess is a blessing in its own right. I'm going to say right now, I'm proud of, I mean, this is like totally cliche, but I'm proud of my wife, who is a public school teacher here in Greensboro and who is teaching second graders coming back into the classroom for the most part after this terrible period and is as one of my colleagues at Elon, when I told my colleague that my wife was a public school teacher said is doing the Lord's work. She's braving COVID. She's trying to help these children who suffered measurably.
Yep, I'm proud of her too. Where's your favorite view?
Um, you know, I'm, and by the way, I should note this is a great format. I'm treating this as kind of like what's the initial thought that comes into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what immediately came to my head is the view of is at Cornell, and it's the view of Lake Cayuga from Willard Straight Hall, which is one of the big student union buildings. So it's looking down what at Cornell is known as the slope. Any a underage drinker has drank at events, by the way, that are de facto sanctioned by the university, which I never understood, down to Lake Cayuga. Absolutely stunning.
Speaking of Cornell and colleges, do college campuses do enough to foster diverse viewpoints?
Um, do enough? No, if that's the way you framed it, no. But my answer is different than lots of folks. I think I am not a fan, although I understand the reasoning for them. I'm not a fan of safe spaces in most instances because we have too few, in my view, places left in our country where divergent viewpoints, even reprehensible ones, are expressed. I think it's important for colleges and college students to be able to vociferously disagree, but disagree as opposed to putting on blinders and saying, oh, I don't agree with that, so I don't want to hear it. So on that scale, I think we could do more.
What's your favorite sports team?
I I'm a Yankee fan. I mean, it's I grew up north of New York City, and as a New Yorker, one of the things I enjoy, which is I say, look, we things and be done with it, and annoying, particularly Boston fans. I enjoy that run.
Statement on our current times. Do you go out of your way to find good gas prices?
Yes, I did that this morning. In fact, in fact, I went to a right by UNC Greensboro. I went to a Shell station that said they didn't have 87 octane gas, but there was the light with a very cheap price, and there I was pumping it, and I drove an extra 5 or 6 minutes. I also went to Shell because they are, in my view, the best of the worst, and that they're the most environmentally friendly oil company, which is an anachronism right there. But at least they don't deny climate change.
Good to know. How do you like your eggs?
Scrambled, scrambled with some pepper. I have no salt.
What's the next big thing?
Um, I think that the next big thing is likely to be um, uh, more robust, um, more robust communication platforms along the lines of Zoom. And that's not really visionary, but my sense is that, well, not my sense, the workplace has changed dramatically. And I think the entity that's able to make what we're doing now friendlier from a human standpoint stands to do quite well.
East Coast or West Coast?
Um, I'm an East Coaster. although I've lived on the West Coast. Um, so I'm biased. I'm going to go, though. I'm going to stick with the East Coast, but I think that's more a function of just having grown up there because I love Northern California in particular.
Well, along those lines, LA or SF?
Sorry, Denise, but if I have to choose San Francisco, but well, I'll just answer your question that way since I have to choose. I'm not a huge fan of either city. I like the Bay Area, um, but if I have to choose, it'll be San Francisco.
New York or DC?
Well, New York again. Actually, it's interesting. That's kind of a wider gulf. I've lived in DC too. I think it's gotten better in recent years. I think the times I was there it was not the easiest place to live.
You clearly have great taste in eyeglasses. I think we're wearing the identical
No, we,
pair.
we I'm about to say it is. They are pretty close.
What's your brand? I don't
This
even know if I can tell mine. Without
brand,
my glasses, I certainly can't.
this is. I don't know if it can be seen with my camera. This is Morel. They're a French brand. What are yours?
I can't tell. I just see dots.
That's why you're
Especially,
wearing
as
them.
I said, without my glasses. I'll get back to you on that one. What's the most underrated subject in law school?
Um, I I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with a nutty one that law students are gonna go nuts if they hear it, but it's administrative law. People hate it; they don't want to learn it, but the administrative state and how to deal with those issues is enormously important. And so I'm gonna put that as the most under.
What's the biggest existential threat to humanity?
Um, I'd love to say aliens, but it is going to be it's climate change. I mean, and the fact that it's moving much faster than predicted even.
So back to your answer about cybersecurity threats, it's once again us.
Yes, in terms of existential threat on the internet, I do blame us. But yeah.
Continuing legal education, essential or we're kidding ourselves?
You know, it is essential, but it's not done very well. Um, so I'll just leave it at that because
$1,000 plus hourly rates for lawyers, a racket or you get what you pay for?
um more often than not, you get what you pay for. 1,000's high, but lawyers that charge that tend to have the track record to back it up.
What was your favorite childhood sitcom?
Uh, I was an enormous fan of Sanford and Son. I'm a huge Red Fox fan and love that show.
What's the best book of all time?
Boy, the best book of all time. I'm going not obscure, although I don't know if it would be on people's best book. I'm going to say Eugene O'Neill's A Long Day's Journey into Night. Um, his playwriting, to me, is brutal in its humanism, and so I'll just leave it at that because that could easily take another.
Barber or stylist?
Stylist at this point. I need all the help I can get.
What instrument did you play in school?
I started playing the clarinet. Well, I played piano. My father was an amateur pianist. But in school, I played clarinet, and then I switched to bassoon in high school, and I played the bassoon through college.
What's your least appreciated talent?
I'm not bad on the drums. I wouldn't, you're not going to hear me play, and I've never heard anyone play like that, except they might say I've heard much better. But I'm pretty good on the drums.
On May 1st, 1992, Rodney King asked, "Can't we all just get along? Can we?"
Um, Despite all evidence to the contrary, I'm still an optimist. I do think we can get along if we remember our shared humanity. We all want food, We all want to be able to provide for our families. We want someone to love, going back to the Beatles. I think if we can remember that as people, we can all get along. I think we allow a lot of external forces and biases and life experience.
Well, Dave, you've done it. You've just gotten through 73 questions, not with Vogue, but with me, Denise Howell, here on the Hearsay Culture Network. I really appreciate it. This was quite fun. These are things that I would love to have asked you if we'd ever had the chance to sit down and have a meal together, which someday we've got to do.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. And I also think that your students would be very wise to look this up and learn a little bit more about Professor Levine. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Denise. This was a lot of fun.